right. Well, welcome to our first Data Accountability and Assessment Network meeting of the year. We're all virtual this time. That's kind of unusual because we've been doing the hybrids now for a couple of years, but we wanted to get in front of you. Ideally, this is an opportunity to kind of reintroduce ourselves to those of you who are DAAN members, veteran DAAN members. And if you're brand new, we wanted to say kind of, here's who we are. Plus, there was just a ton of information that came out this summer around assessment and accountability. You may have heard some of it, but we want to just reiterate it, make sure it's locked in for you. So we thought we'd take an opportunity to have an early in the year meeting, earlier than we usually meet. And we know it's a busy time of year, but we think it'll be really valuable to kind of set the tone for the year, and also just make sure everybody's familiar with all the changes going on. So some quick introductions. I am Evan Bartelheim. I'm the project director for accountability and data literacy. And I've got my colleague, Dr. Hillary Weissman, with me, and my team, Roy Lung and Karina Nahara, are both here. Jeremy is on a special assignment, special limited term assignment with another unit. So we won't see him for a few months, but he'll be back eventually. And I've got my assessment colleagues. I'll let them introduce themselves.
I'm Stephen Bartlett. I'm with the assessment unit in the Division of Curriculum and Instructional Services for Los Angeles County Office of Education. And my colleague.
Hello, I'm Sarah Nitzos. I work alongside Stephen with assessment. Nice to see everyone today.
And I don't want anybody out there to think that this is not purposeful, this green and blue. It is twinning day here at LACOE. And so, Stephen and I actually always just wear these shirts. It's just, we don't even have to think about it. It's just a given. We're going to be wearing the light blue dress shirt. But no, Hillary and Sarah went out of their way to twin today. So you aren't seeing things. So the purpose of DAAN and the refresher, as I said, if you're new to DAAN, we're going to spend a few slides just kind of revisiting what we're about. So we are a collective, a network for LEA administrators who have responsibilities in that overlapping areas of data assessment and accountability. Our goal is to share information with you, timely information around state board decisions, things that are happening in policies coming out of the CDE, things that come to us through the regional assessment network, and any assessment insights or best practices for data-driven continuous improvement that we come across. And we'll do some of that today. Our DAAN meetings are an opportunity to connect with your colleagues. This one via Zoom is not the best, but we're going to talk a little bit about our future, our in-person options, and we really encourage you to participate with those, and the ability to share resources, because that's what makes this network really valuable. We were all DAAN members before we became facilitators, and I think we all know how valuable that in-person opportunities to meet others, how important those are. And we're going to just kind of walk through our purpose statement and then go over some of the additional things that we offer.
So some of you might be new to this session. Some of you, this is your next go around with us, so welcome back. We wanted to go over briefly what our DAAN commitment statement is. We wanted to make sure that you're really aware of what we offer here as supports. We want to make sure our communication is purposeful. So when you're getting that DAAN digest, we're really trying our best to distill all of the information that is out there and make it usable for you so that you can have a quick one-stop shop for everything you need to know to march forward within your role. We really want to set up this inquiry-based culture that's kind of a think tank so that we're working together to build community, as Evan said, not only within ourselves, so that we can all benefit from everyone's ideas and that we're not out there working in our own little boxes in this world. We really want to make a trust-focused system that we're really looking at systems thinking and how we can look strategically to build up those systems. We want to be responsive and support. I know that if any of you have ever emailed any of us, you know that we are very quick to respond. We grab anyone else within the LACOE broader organization who might support your work going forward. We see this as a shared responsibility and that we're all in this together. All right, moving on.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. I forgot to bring my singing voice. I'm sorry.
That's okay next time.
skipped ahead. And as I noted, and what Sarah was just alluding to, we wanted to bring attention. People come to the DAAN meetings and maybe think that's the be all end all to what we do, but we actually have pretty expansive roles outside of just the DAAN meetings. Certainly, it's informed by a lot of the same information will come through to the DAAN meetings that we're doing in other capacities. But we just wanted to highlight a few of these things, and this is not an exhaustive list, but we're going to go through some of the additional data supports, and we have different unit titles. There's the data accountability and data literacy unit and the assessment unit, but just like you guys, we wear a lot of hats and there's a lot of overlap here. But with regards to the data support for DAAN, beyond DAAN, we do provide technical assistance with the CalPads via the CalPads network. And we address data quality issues, maybe not always even CalPads related, but other things are popping up on DataQuest. How did this happen? Helping try to drive the solutions. We developed some data tools, our data visualizations that we use primarily for the differentiated assistance work that we do with districts. So many of you who've been in that have seen our tools, but we also provide those for our LCAP team for mostly internal tools, but then we also will share those tools externally with districts and charter schools. SIRS training that takes place. This is an example where assessment team has their own, data sources that they're the experts in. And hopefully some of you have been using that. And I'll use that to plug in a minute. We're going to, or not a minute, but later in the presentation, we're going to do a deep dive on a couple of the data tools we have available for CAASPP if you haven't already started playing around with your data. And then we do things like we provide the LCAP metrics. We update those annually, how to get the LCAP metrics, some of those more unusual ones like the reclassification rate. You can really only calculate it yourself. It hasn't been posted. And by the way, we've heard, by the grapevine that the CDE will not be producing that. So you're going to be on your own to produce that. We help you find that. We help you to find what that is and how to calculate it. And then in the big picture, we like to help districts in determining, are they using the best practices around data use to create effective decision-making processes, and are they using their data effectively across the organization? So we use like the data use self-assessment for things like that. Stephen, you want to talk a little bit about the assessment support beyond DAAN?
Absolutely. So assessment supports are there to keep you up to date on any of the CAASPP or LPAC or CAST changes. For example, a great aspect of our Wednesdays at One network meeting is the opportunity to share our struggles, our victories, as those changes come into the systems and to our circumstances as well. We seek clarity from our community of colleagues and directly from our success agent, who makes it makes a chance to make that meeting every week. We also look at accessibility tools, not just for testing, but how you can use them all year to support students. Our upcoming accessibility PD this year are presented in coordination, not just with special education division, but with the unit responsible for universal design for learning. So looking at both aspects of in-classroom and support. We'll talk about tying assessments into instruction, making sure it's not separate, but part of daily learning. And of course, we point you to the resources and supports available so you don't have to dig for them and find always what's new. Finally, we connect the dots between formative practices and summative assessments and attempt to show how they work together to support students. And I think I'm going to pass it on to Hillary.
Right, and to kind of round out our group here when it comes to accountability and what that looks like, a lot of which has been mentioned. And as you can see, there's a lot of crossover between LACOE units and LACOE divisions, and a lot of support provided to our LEAs and to districts. Through the accountability lens, a lot of LCAP and dashboard and local indicator support. If you've ever gone to, and I know we have a few from our LCAP state and federal programs unit on today. Thank you guys for supporting us. But if you've ever gone to one of their meetings, you will know that we always, and Evan will produce and update the local indicator support data matrix and talk about best data to align with goals and actions. We support federal accountability expertise and engage in those conversations and think tanks. The use of accountability measures to support continuous improvement, and what does it look like to relate autopsy or system, and or see the people and talk about what that system might look like as it relates to the data. We also use a lot of the visualizations that have been produced by Roy, who's on here, and we will help to identify achievement gaps, equity lenses. We use this most recently when we were working with GSPP, and we do work with other units to kind of look at areas for opportunity. And most importantly, in addition to these tools and resources, making sure there's alignment, right? If we're doing all this work, we want to make sure that we're aligning our outcomes and we're monitoring them. And with this year's LCAP question of effectiveness and ineffectiveness, I believe that we'll have some more tools on the way to kind of monitor that. And I'll hand it back to Evan.
All right, thanks, Hillary. And I just want to note, you can reach out to us at any time if any of these things that you said, oh, I just didn't realize that they did that. Or if you're curious what that might look like, please reach out to us. We know we get a lot of you, once you tap into the resources that we have to offer, become regular users, which that makes our day. I mean, there's nothing we like more than to help people when they need a thought partner. And that's kind of our role. And as Sarah mentioned, we also have a lot of people at LACOE with a lot of talents, that sometimes they're not even apparent based on their job title but we may know that we can point you in the right direction. So just a reminder, and we've got the links in the presentation. We'll drop them in again for those of you who are just joining. But everything's posted. Our meeting materials are always posted in our Canvas page. We have a agenda up there today that has all the links, and we'll add a few more as we go. We always are like throwing links in and then realize, oh, we got to put it in the slide presentation and in the Canvas page, but it's always there. As always, this information is current as of yesterday. Things are prone to change, not quite as rapidly as they have in the past, but they still do change. If you have any questions that come up, please use the chat, or if you have something that hits you like the thought after you leave the meeting, oh gosh, I needed some clarity on something, please go ahead and email us. We have the DAAN@laco.edu, and we always send out that follow-up Q&A with more exhaustive responses than we ever can provide here, including links to the resources, because it's always nice when you're talking to a cabinet member and you say, this is where it says in ed code, right? Because it's a lot. Somebody at LACOE said something in a slide presentation. I wouldn't trust that either, but we'll make sure you follow up. We can follow up with some resources that you can count on. So our meetings for the year, we have, like I said, this first one, then we meet again in September. As you'll note, the 4 meetings that follow this one will all be hybrid meetings. So you can join us in person. I'm going to talk about what the benefits of that are in just a second. And then our Tuesday meeting, we're still trying to drill down. It's really hard around LACOE with so many people vying for rooms where we'll be, but I think we'll find some place and we'll communicate that to you, or maybe somebody wants to host. It's kind of hard to host now that we do hybrid because we have to be, have all the capacity to be broadcasting essentially. So anyway, but we'll find something and we'll let you know. So what's the advantage though? Why DAAN? Why come to DAAN in person? Sarah's daughter said we need a sizzle reel. We'll make one. We'll make one, at the next meeting. But we do offer, today is an exception. We'll offer our extension activities. You're online, you can just stick around. But what we like to do is after we get through the stuff that everybody needs to know, we turn off the Zoom, and then for the people in the room, we have a little more engaging activity. We know it's impossible to do via Zoom. Nobody likes to go into breakouts, and it's hit or miss. But in person, it can be very engaging. And so among the things that we can promise you we'll provide this year are hands-on opportunities to learn, that opportunity to share with your peers, to learn from people with similar districts or charter schools what they're doing. Deeper discussions. We've had some great discussions in the past around a variety of things, how you're communicating this, the science results, how you're communicating other results. And that's always a big piece of like, how do I talk to my board about, not great results, right? It's easy when everything's great, but what about those times when you're like, ooh, this student group is lost ground 2 years in a row. How am I going to share that effectively? The opportunity network, which, is critical, it may lead to a job here at LACOE. You never know, but I'm just saying. But yeah, the opportunity really to meet your other peers, and then the dedicated focus time. So if you come here, at least you're away from the whirlwind, right? I know even when you're online, you're answering your emails, you maybe hit send and go back, I just totally missed that last thing. So we offer the opportunity to stay here in a kind of a quiet space. I didn't want to mention, actually, I forgot to mention this, and I don't think we have a slide for it, but we are actually hosting a new coordinator training. So if any of you are brand new, and we're going to dig through it, we realize there may be a shortcoming, but there's a new coordinator. And by new coordinator, I'm talking specifically about CAASPP and LPAC, a new coordinator training at LACOE on September 15th. And we realized that they were going off the list. If you indicated this was a new coordinator, not everybody fills that in. So we know that there are some of you out there who are new coordinators this year, or maybe new coordinators as of last year. We're going to drill in and figure out who you are, make sure you get an invite, and that's an in-person. And several of our DAAN members are going to be part of a network panel to talk about best practices. Very exciting. I'm very excited about that. We've got some great folks who are going to share. So look for an email. We didn't put it in here, but we'll send out an email to those of you who we suspect of being new, even if you weren't marked as new when you registered as a CAASPP coordinator. Anything to add on that assessment team? Because you guys are going to be the facilitators. Okay, so that's right. Okay. In the chat, we just want to know, what was your favorite memory from the summer? Your favorite summer moment? You know, what was it? What did you do? Sarah, you had some excitement this summer.
We took a family road trip and drove all the way up to Ashland, Oregon to go to the Oregon Shakespeare Festival and visit family and friends. And I have a wonderful minivan that has served me well, and it decided not to work any longer and conked out in Ashland, Oregon. So I had the joy of purchasing a new car out of state and all of the rigmarole that goes with that. Now, for those of you saying, oh, but Oregon, no sales tax. No, no, no. Sales tax is calculated based on where you live, not based on where you purchase. So I now have a new car.
Nice. Well, I see Heather did some falconry at Catalina Island. That's out there. That's new.
Gloria White. Oh, I'm sorry, Gloria. I wanted to highlight Gloria White. She sent her child to college for the first time.
I know there's a lot of stories about that. And before Evan shares his story, I'm sure I will acknowledge I see someone went to Europe. We got a lot of people who are traveling, adventuring lakes. So they're getting out and about. I did not travel far, which was a little bit different because I normally like to in the summer, but I had a few staycations. Anyone maybe who likes Palm Springs or likes really hot weather, I was there a few times this summer. I'm going to go back maybe in a week. There is an area out there called the summer, what is it? It's Palm Springs, like surf spot. And it's like an old school that's been redone. Like, I don't know, water park, but there's a surf pool there. And I got to go twice now and go surf in the surf pool, which is very different than being at the beach, but it is a lot of fun. And I highly recommend it. However, let's turn over to Evan and anyone else here who has dropped their child off to school.
Oh, yeah, no, this is a big one. The 2007 birth year, apparently, biggest demographically. So yeah, I've got twins. They're both, I dropped one off last week, and I've got another that's going up to Cal Poly SLO in 2 weeks. So that's the preparation for that. My house looked like an Amazon center. It was like, it's craziness. And there's like a whole cottage industry around preparing your kids' dorm room. So we did not partake in that. We'll let them figure it out on their own. That's part of college life, right? But yeah. Trying to figure out if Eric got a parking ticket, I'm not a parking ticket, but he got a travel ticket.
I like the emojis. What happened there? I'm interested now.
Yeah, Anita, our colleague Anita and we've been sharing. We've got like 7 or 8 LACOE colleagues who dropped off their kids for college. It's kind of funny. All right. Oh, for Sarah's car. Thank you. All right. Well, we appreciate you sharing a little bit of your life. Hopefully you did get to do something. I know sometimes it's easy to get caught up because everything comes in, of course, during the summer when everybody else is out and about, and just when you're getting ready to relax, they're all coming back going, hey, can you tell me what does our data look like? So what we'll do today, we're going to do some accountability updates. Like I said, there's a ton of stuff that came out of the state board meeting in July that's has some implications for this upcoming dashboard and for future dashboards. Just some brief CalPads and data updates, and some professional learning opportunities that we want to share with you. Then the assessment team will go over a bunch of updates around assessment and their professional learning opportunities. And then we'll have our extension activities. And because, we're all on Zoom, we're going to have that live. We're going to talk about how you're able to access and visualize and communicate your LEA's preliminary CAASPP results and some of the restrictions around that, or understanding about what you can and can't do, and then what you're using. And we have two different approaches. I'm using SIRS and a tool from our friends at SCOE that we're going to demo for you, and we can talk about that and get a little bit of your stuff in preparation for our next hybrid meeting. So onward and upward.
It goes. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to jump on over and look because I know we have a lot of things to go over. As Evan mentioned, I wanted to wish everyone a happy 25-26 academic year. And as the team's kind of said, it has been a busy summer filled with a lot of updates that you're going to hear about. And whether you were able to tune in to the July State Board meeting, you watched the recording because you were super cool on a Friday evening maybe, or even if you were off enjoying some summer fun, we're going to distill the information, give you some key takeaways, because that's what we're here to do for you. And if you did watch that meeting, you'll know that about a 3.5-hour meeting. It was very interesting. Decisions made, some decisions not made, then modifications in other cases. So as we move forward, let's kick it off with the long-awaited milestone of the science indicator. I know we spoke about it last year. I know a lot of people have a lot of questions about it moving forward. And after years of advocacy and thoughtful planning, the State Board of Education, they finally and officially adopted the components, as you can see, that are needed for this indicator to appear with a color rating on the 2025 dashboard, with the approval of the status cut points, change cut points, and the color scheme for the 5x5 grid. I know Evan's going to talk about it at the when he gets to his section, a little bit about the trailer bill language, which calls for, a reevaluation of the current DA criteria to better reflect the challenges that are faced by LEAs. The science indicator, as because of that, it's going to remain in the informational purposes section only, and it will not have any impact on the local control funding formula eligibility determinations on the dashboard. However, it will still be prominent on the front page. And just as a quick recap, the data that powers this indicator we know comes from those two main sources: the California Science Test, we know as CAST, and the California Alternate Assessment for Science. And that together, that's what's giving us that kind of clear picture of how students are doing with the next generation science standards. And to tag on to that as another quick reminder, those science assessments work a bit differently than other subjects. They're not given every year. Instead, as we know, students are tested at 3 key points in their school journey, once in 5th grade and once in 8th grade and once in high school. So this timing is going to give us that snapshot and how they're doing at those milestones. Since 2024, when the dashboard gave us a first glimpse into these science assessment results, things have evolved for the 2025 dashboard, as you can see here. For clarity purposes, okay, the CDE proposed a distinct metrics for the science indicator. Yes, there we go. For the science indicator, and it maintains the scale score metric similar from the distance from standard used for ELA and math indicators, but it creates a new scale that fits the unique nature of the science assessment. And the scale adjustment moves that the reference points used by distance from standard from the lowest point value of level 3 standard met to a new reference point for science, for the science points, which is the lowest point value of level 1 standard not met. What this really means is that this transforms the range of the scale and points to a more simplified scale from 0 to 100. And I've included, as you can see here, the status cut scores above as a reference point, since we've reviewed and previously talked about this in DAAN. And for students, to speak to the students who are taking the CAA, this process is slightly different. Since the CAA uses performance levels instead of scale scores, a crosswalk was used to match each level to the highest possible CAS score within that level. So that score is then converted into science points, which ensures consistency of both across both assessments. And as you can see here, additionally, the familiar 5x5 performance table is still in use and featuring the same balanced color scheme as the other academic indicators. As I said, if you last recall our previous years in DAAN, or if not, we provided everyone with that handy dandy cast scale score to science point converter. It's a mouthful there, which is a nice tool that is proven from our feedback we've heard in the field. It's very useful when communicating, planning, and unpacking scores. We've included that again at the end of the presentation after the live demonstration with the SCOE Tom's dashboard tool for your reference, for you to use again, and I'm sure it will be something that we will be bringing back. As we move along, you might be asking yourself at this point, is there a participation rate penalty? And the short answer is yes. The state board approved the participation rate requirement for the science indicator when it was adopted. This means that LEA schools and student groups must test at least 95% of their eligible students. For each student needed to reach that 95% mark, the system assigns the lowest possible score, which is 0 science points. Remember, that's at 0 to 100, so it makes it a little bit easier. This approach mirrors the same methodology that we're accustomed to with the academic indicator, but as I said, it's much more simplified, with 0 being the lowest possible score. And conversely, if your LEA or school or student group meets or exceeds that 95% participation rate, there's no penalty. Their average science points will be based solely on the valid student scores without any assigned loss. And this loss score methodology has been in place for years and should be somewhat familiar, just the difference in the number. And so the common question is around, and I said it before that there's no implications, but just as a reminder, a common question we typically get is around the performance of the science indicator and its effect on federal accountability. And again, the short answer is not yet. So stay tuned to see what that may look like in 2026. Just know that science indicator, it's valuable, it's visible, it's informative, but not yet tied to any sort of accountability decisions. As we move on, everyone's favorite, growth data. And I say everyone's favorite because this one typically generates a lot of conversation, very rich and robust conversation. So there's a lot of excitement around it. And as we know, this data, it's been years in the making. This indicator is great in that it doesn't just track achievement, but it charts that momentum, which is a powerful kind of shift and difference in how we typically understand and look at student success, where it's normally just a snapshot from the previous year to this current year. A key distinction with regards to growth data is to remember that it's different from achievement data. Like I just said, achievement data, from an assessment, it shows how much students at a given time, how much, how it works during this current year, whereas the dashboard is going to be showing more growth of how their achievement grows over time from one grade to the next grade, as compared to their peers across the state. As a reminder, that growth data was developed specifically to be used for accountability purposes only, not for individual student level. However, as we know, an aggregate growth score for an LEA school or student group is available and reflects how average growth performance at an LEA or school compares to average growth for all tested students in the state. So you're not going to see it on the dashboard and be able to get the granular view of individual students. And as a recap for a little bit more context, what's kind of occurred from January on, as we know, on January 31st of 2025, the CDE released the first set of growth scores based upon the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress assessment results from the 2021-22, 22-23, and 23-24 school years. During their March state board meeting, the CDE and the state's testing coordinator, ETS, they presented the growth data from schools, districts, and student groups available on the dashboard and asked the state board to provide some decisions on the incorporation of student level growth for grades 4 through 8 in ELA and math onto the 2025 dashboard. And in July this year, after much anticipation, despite a pause on testing during the pandemic, the state board officially approved the growth model display. And for the first time, ELA and math growth data will appear on the front page of the dashboard, along other indicators like the science indicator, which will be different than 2024, where it was kind of, I don't want to say buried, but it wasn't as prevalent on that front page. So now it's going to be standing strong in the front there. So what will growth actually look like on the 2025 dashboard? growth will have a very different appearance compared to other indicators, and even compared to how it was displayed in 2024. To start, as you can see, there will be no change levels and no colors, which means it will continue to be published as additional information with no impact on LCFF eligibility determinations. Instead, the growth card will feature new information. It will show one of 5 growth performance categories that the state board approved. And as you can see here, I don't know if that's orangish yellow. You'll see they've got minimal growth, moderate growth, average growth, accelerated growth, and exceptional growth. Although these categories, they took some time to agree upon. If you saw the conversations, the state board agreed that these will help the public paint a clearer picture of how students are progressing year over year in comparison to the rest of the state. The card will also include the percent of students whose scores improved from prior years, offering a really direct view of student progress. Keep in mind, because the length of the time it takes to calculate that growth data, I think, Evan, if you're near 10 weeks or so, you can expect that the data file will be published in December 2025, which is still much sooner than previously. As I said before we go to the next slide, growth data has elicited very robust conversations. We are very excited as a DAAN team to talk about it, and I even anticipate that one of our DAAN group topics will be associated with the impact for planning and communicating. So stay tuned on more on student growth. Also new for this year is the inclusion of the diploma pathway for students who qualify for the California alternate assessment as outlined in the California Ed Code sections. In the graduation rate indicator, students completing this pathway will count towards a school or LA's graduation rate on the dashboard. So this pathway means that students with exceptional needs can graduate from high school through the newly defined diploma pathway. This opens, an additional lane for students with disabilities previously not recognized with this diploma, which kind of recognizes, as we know, the achievements in supporting their journey towards graduation, but it also reflects a graduation rate that's more robust of all of our students. For those of you interested in learning a little bit more, exploring this pathway, we've included a link with resources and additional information, and we look forward to this group being added to the graduation rate indicator. So moving along to the college career indicator for 2025, which I'll say I think was a larger portion of July's conversation. I think that the question was being asked is, what does it mean to offer a broad course of study? So in the past year, the Department of Education, the State Board of Education, have been evaluating and expanding the view of what it means for a school or an LAA to show that they have programs that prepare students for college and career. As you can see on the slide, the board made the following modifications to the college career indicator measure. First off, they expanded recognition of advanced placement courses. So previously you needed a 3 on 2 AP exams. Now they've also included, starting with this year, AP courses. So completing with a grade of C or better in a course will now demonstrate that a school or LEA has contributed to the student's readiness. This change strengthens the AP measures and also impacts the indicator from the UC and CSU entrance requirements. And when the data was run, although it's not presented right here, there was an increase in schools and students who are now eligible. In addition, the state board also talked about reviewing for the 2026 dashboard the International Baccalaureate coursework for students, as that is different than AP in that you need to take a sequence of classes that are then followed by an exam. And so IB, International Baccalaureate, and Cambridge International Educational Program, those are up for possible inclusion on the 2026 dashboard as they spend more time looking into it. Another change modification is an update for the dashboard is the transitional classroom and work-based learning experience measure within the CCNI readiness indicator, which is awarded to the alternate diploma pathway students, which I was speaking to previously on the graduation rate indicator updates. This change, as I said, ensures and measures aligned with the unique experiences and opportunities available to students with exceptional needs, while also reinforcing the importance of recognizing multiple pathways to readiness and success. And lastly, and finally, for 2025 dashboard, the Regional Occupational Center and Programs, also known as ROCP, it is on a detour. The ROCP participation is no longer a part of the state and federal job programs measures for the CCNI. And those are some updates for the 2025 dashboard. And if we move along to the sneak peek for 2026 and 2027, as we look ahead, there was a lot of discussion for the 2026 dashboard amongst the state board to continue additional ways for LEAs and schools to demonstrate that they offer robust programs designed to prepare students for success in college, career, and beyond. In addition, the state board directed the CDE to continue, as you know, to collect the data on internships, student-led enterprise, simulated work, based learning, and the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery test, as well as the state seal of civic engagement for future considerations in the CCNI. The state board also recommended a study on the structure of internships and pre-apprenticeships as related to the CCNI, including students with extensive support needs. The data is currently being and has been collected, as you know, for several years with the intent of better understanding how LEAs support these endeavors. And it was interesting if you watch the portion of the state board meeting, especially since this information has been presented before, the data for these measures. And even when it's been presented previously, specifically around participation rate, pre and post pandemic, and in some instances that participation has declined post pandemic. Despite that, the state board is interested in investigating further and understanding the impact and trying to keep as most robust offering of a broad course of study. So stay tuned for that. For the 2027 dashboard, the 9227 college course credit, other state course code, will no longer be included as a college credit course used in the CCNI. And this change won't be retroactive and it will only impact the class of 2027 and beyond. In part, this is because LEAs have misattributed many academic and CTE courses to this course code, as well as courses that are neither academic or CTE in nature. And I think I recall even Evan saying he's seen things like, walking course or yoga course kind of lumped into this. So to help prepare for this shift, LEAs and schools are encouraged to review their college credit course mapping and ensure classes are coded with the appropriate state course codes and CalPads. When we transition to Evan's section, he might be able to speak a little bit more in CalPads or better positioned to talk about any offerings or instances in which we might support the unpacking of this process. But I will leave that to him. As we start to wrap up and move on here, of course, you've got the dashboard toolkit that eagerly anticipated to come out in November. As you can see, it is your one-stop shop guide for everything you need, from communication support to individual indicator flyers to the popular tech guide and FAQs. I'm sure as we get closer to the dashboard release, we'll continue to promote it. And once it's released, we will dig into it for you and pull out key pieces of information that have transitioned since then. And lastly, before I turn it over, a little note on accountability afternoons. The CDE is previously, and they're going to resume hosting these sessions where they answer live in the moment questions associated with everything accountability. Sometimes these questions are surface level and other times they can be very weedy. We know you're busy, so the DAAN team's got you covered. Okay, don't worry. We will be in attendance. We'll be taking notes for you. Should you have a question, please feel free to email one of us. We're happy to elevate it for you, but do know that you can expect us to provide you those updates, common questions that are asked in our DAAN Digest and DAAN Flashes so that you are in the know. And I'm not sure if we have questions, if we've been answering them, because my screen is kind of loaded up here.
We've answered as many. I know somebody had their hand up, maybe it was inadvertent, but if you had your hand up and you wanted to ask a question, feel free to ask it now. Otherwise, yeah, we've gone through a lot and answered as we could. It was great to see that at least two of our districts have already implemented that alternative diploma pathway. I know there's a lot of steps in it. I want to hear more. And I know our special education unit has done work on this in the past, and I don't know if they're still involved in it, but it's certainly an interesting opportunity. And from the accountability standpoint, it's great because you open up more opportunities for students to graduate and to meet college and career indicator prepared level. So that's kind of cool. Okay, Jonathan, that was a mistake. Anjanette, the dashboard toolkit, they'll start rolling it out. It's like a rolling release. They'll start rolling it out in November, prior to the release of the dashboard, which I'll talk about during my section. So just a few reminders. So if you were a dashboard coordinator, you were purged in a couple weekends ago. So hopefully you got back in. So on August 15th, they reset the dashboard coordinator database, and only superintendents and charter school administrators are retained. And then everybody else has to sing for their supper and put in an application again. And as what will happen, you'll apply and it gets pushed down in your superintendent's inbox. And so you really, if you haven't gotten a confirmation from the dashboard, you might want to drop a note to your superintendent or the executive secretary, whoever that monitors that, and say, hey, will you look out for that? might have gone to spam, but you want to get in there because there's some important stuff you'll need to do. One of which is, and this was really pushed back this year, if you'll recall, we've talked about this before, the priority one local indicator utilizes the TAMO data, right? It uses the TAMO report. In the past, it's always been released after July 1st, so you couldn't even present it to your board in advance. The expectation was you would present it to your board in a non-consent item, just like you did the other local indicators, upon the release of that TAMO data. And all you have to do is cover the clear part, right? The same stuff that gets automatically populated on the dashboard. However, this year was pushed back even further because the CDE produced 5 years worth of data around teacher demographics. It was really helpful. I know some of you had been looking for that data, so we hadn't seen it in a long time, but that pushed back the TAMO data. It still has not been released. I think they expected it to be released by the end of August, which is actually getting pretty close. So looking forward any day. So once that data comes out, if you were responsible as the dashboard coordinator for presenting, or you're the LCAP person, remember that you have to present that to your board. It can't be via, Friday letter, or it has to be the expectation is presented to your board in a non-consent item, and will reflect the percentage of clear teachers or FTEs within your LEA. Is there a template? I see, Heather, your question. I have written some up in the past, and I will drop that in the follow-up Q&A. And we typically, I think other LEAs have got some examples too. And it just needs to be presented to the first opportunity you can, Rachel. So if you see a board meeting in the very near future, I would put an agenda item on it, because sometimes it can take a while. I don't think anybody's going to come and say, oh, you missed the very first available board meeting, but it is supposed to be shared shortly after release. So, and then once it's released, if there's anything you want to add, there's an optional narrative. It actually will be available to you at any time, where you may want to go in and say, I don't know, make clarifications. So for instance, this is one of those areas where, like, oh, we have a high, percentage of what appear to be, non-clear teachers, but a lot of those are local assignment options and things that are allowed by the CTC, allowed by state law, that you may just want to clarify. If it looks like, or if there's a misunderstanding in your community, like, wow, are all these teachers uncredentialed? Like, just to clarify, this does not mean they're not credentialed. This just means they may be teaching a class, they may be teaching sports. Like all your coaches who are teaching English or social studies, they get a letter, they have a local assignment option, which is not included as a clear assignment. So anyway, those are things to note. Also, this year, once again, LEAs are required to upload a PDF to the dashboard of their approved and adopted, or adopted and approved. If you're a district, it has to be the LACOE approved version that you'll upload to the MyCDE Connect portal. And that window is going to open on October 13th and close October 31st. We'll work with our friends in the LCAP team to make sure everybody's aware when it opens up, but not all LCAP coordinators or LCAP writers are the dashboard coordinators. So we also will get a list of dashboard coordinators, and we'll be sending little reminders. We got everybody. We pulled through and got every single one of our districts and almost all of our charter schools were able to post their local indicators by the deadline this year. So that's really helpful. So in relation to the priority one, since we didn't quite know where to put this, this is a change to the dashboard this year, and it's related to some language that was in ed code around identifying the disparities between schools. And there was push, like we want to see there's some higher profile around the teaching assignment data. So what you'll find this year is at the LEA level. So if you're a district, you will have your teacher assignments, just the percent clear, not the state average or anything. It'll just say above the state average, at the state average, below the state average. And then the view more details link will appear on the front page, on the landing page, the main page, as opposed to where it has been, which is you have to drill down to the priority one local indicator data. So this will be at the front of your dashboard. Then also at the school level, they'll have the percent at the school level. It won't include any of the state information. Then when you click the view more details, it's going to take you to the main LEA level information, which includes the state levels and everything. And then there's a link that goes to DataQuest. So all that is going to be added now to the front of the dashboard. And so, hopefully if there are any real inaccuracies or anything, or any concerns, you'll take advantage of the optional narrative that you have. So this year we'll have some state and federal support determinations. Just want to make sure we're clear on that, and some interesting changes in DA eligibility. So first of all, when will they be posted? So LCFF support determinations. So this is, differentiated assistance for districts, county offices, and charter schools. Those will be released on November 13th, which is the same day that the dashboard is released. And side note on that, they initially said there wouldn't be a private preview for the dashboard, but then they recanted. So they expect that maybe there will be a week-long dashboard preview this year. So that November 13th release, you'll see immediately your differentiated assistance. It's released as a separate file. And when that date comes, we'll let everybody know where to find that. And then the ESSA determination. So eligibility for TSI or exit from CSI or ATSI, that will come out in December. They haven't specified when, but it takes a little bit longer to calculate those. And that's really the issue, is that you have to calculate all the rules, apply all the rules, and remove this group. And anybody who exited now is going to be resubjected to the criteria. So as a reminder, here's the federal support determinations timeline. We're in year 3, right? So, the final year of the 3-year cycle. So the only thing that'll happen this year is any schools can be identified for targeted support intervention, which is just a 1-year status, right? And that's based on student group level performance and the criteria that was set back in 2023 for the ATSI. So it's like all red indicators but one, right? All those things. They'll all be applied the same way. You can, however, if your school was identified, for CSI, they can exit. They would then be considered for TSI though, so they could exit CSI but be picked up for TSI, or they could exit ATSI. And if you exit ATSI, you're not going to meet TSI requirements. So, and then once again in 2026, we go back to the start with a 3-year identification of CSI and ATSI schools. So a big change this year, as many of you know, we had the addition last year of the long-term English learners as a student group, and it resulted in a lot of districts and charter schools being identified for this student group. And so a big change that the state board approved in July was that they were modifying priority 4 to look at only the LP, and only the LP, but both the red and orange levels would be considered having met the criteria for long-term English learners. It removes the academic indicators for ELA and math from consideration. And that was where we saw for every district that was identified for that student group. I think all but one were identified for the academic indicators, as well as one other indicator. So this we ran the numbers. We said, well, what if this rule applied last year and it reduced the number of districts meeting the eligibility for LTELs from 30 to 20, I believe. So we expect that this will decrease the number. Plus, then I think a lot of districts and charter schools who had LTELs eligible were focused on other things like chronic absenteeism or suspension rate. So we would expect that we're going to see a pretty big drop this year. For future consideration, they're also considering adjusting the LP calculation to incorporate LTELs who were reclassified within the year. So if you reclassified as English proficient within the school year prior to the administration of the LPAC, they're looking, is there a way we can give districts credit for that as well, which was actually how the original LP was, but the feds made us remove it. This is a little bit different because LTELs aren't part of our federal ESSA plan, so they can make tweaks to the LTELs because it's only for state eligibility. They're also looking to make modifications to the suspension rate indicator, and it's really in response to kind of a unique aspect of the student group, which is you can't become an LTEL until 6th grade or later. And so particularly for elementary school districts, the suspension rate 5x5 is kind of out of whack because you've got a very small denominator, only 6th grade students who may be getting suspended, and it looks like they're being suspended disproportionately, but you don't have LTELs in kindergarten through 5th grade, whereas all other student groups are represented. So I would expect that's a change they'll make, but that's one of the things they're looking at. And then finally, and this one, who knows if it's possible, but there are those two separate ed code definitions of LTEL, and they are looking, can we possibly align them to make it a little less confusing to people, particularly around the 7-year identification, right? That's the 52052. The dashboard one is the 7 years having been identified as an English learner, and that's not quite the same in the 313.1 definition. So looking to change that. So the other thing that's it actually started, but we haven't had any districts or county offices eligible yet via this method, which is CalPAD certification or failure to certify in a timely fashion. Continues to be a possibility for eligibility for differentiated assistance or technical assistance. And I, up until this final end of year submission, I was on top of it. I missed the end of year submission. So I don't know if every single district was able to certify on time. I know shortly thereafter I checked and everybody was certified, but they may have missed by one day. So anyway, it's possible that we would have somebody identified, but you would be alerted to this. Your LEA would be alerted to this, and that it's differentiated assistance is going to basically have 1 year of support provided by the county and CSIS and other technical support providers. Now next year, this is kind of during the school year we're about to start. In addition to failing to certify, a district or county office, this doesn't apply to charter schools. District or county office could be identified with a data quality issue. And so what that may look like, we don't know yet. The CDE is still defining it, but you could imagine where, in 1 year where your A through G rate plummeted from 50% to 2%, right? It's kind of hard to hide those things, and they do happen, but we don't know what the threshold will be and what how significant they're going to make it before they'll identify you for DA. And thank you for making that point, Devin, our colleague from the Moss unit, that the changes for differentiated assistance eligibility only apply to LTELs. The EL student group is still being measured by both the academic indicators and the LP for priority 4. And finally, this is kind of a big deal. We'll see. There was some trailer bill language added this year that said no later than July 15th of 2026, the state board shall update the performance criteria. That's the DA eligibility criteria, taking into consideration the findings and recommendations from the state funded evaluation, which was conducted by WestEd, of the state's differentiated assistance system and its implementation, and the need to appropriately focus resources and supports where the demonstrated needs are greatest. And the board president kind of dove into this a little bit, basically saying, no, we just need to reshuffle, reconsider, like, do we have adequate resources? Are we over identifying, and I think the LTELs was kind of like a shot across the bow, like, wow, all these districts were not eligible for any other student group were suddenly made eligible by LTELs, right? And so is it really a failure on that part, or was it just, could have been like a technical aspect of the way long-term English learners were defined and things like, how the measurements work. So those are all going to be taking being taken up this next year. And included in this will be the consideration of how we could include science. The science indicator, as Hillary mentioned earlier, it's not being used for LCFF eligibility after the 2025, but it may be after 2026. Similarly, can growth scores be incorporated? It'll always take a little bit longer for the growth scores to appear, so that's a bit of an impediment, but they haven't ruled out the possibility that growth will be also incorporated in DA eligibility criteria. And then they're also looking about the capacity of county offices, the CCE, and other system of support entities to do all this support, right? If we have 60% of our districts are identified for DA, what's differentiated about that assistance? Everybody's receiving it basically. So that's going to be taken up this year. And so we'll be watching and relaying what's on there. So that, I believe, oh wait, we've got data. Shoot, I better pick up the pace here. Data updates. So here's just a list of our CalPADS data submissions. Primarily, I'm just going to point out to you, we did a great series last year. We're not repeating it this year. It's going to run every other year, but we will provide supports for you. But everything's moved up a little bit, particularly around the end of the year, because next year, or 2026, the dashboard will be published on October 15th. So give your CalPADS people lots of baked goods this year. That's all I'm saying. It's going to be a very stressful year. Not a lot has changed in fall 1 or fall 2 deadlines, but just remember that it really does take a village of support for your CalPADS people, and you want your data to be accurate now because there are implications if it's not. There's new CalPADS training. So if you're interested in what you could learn and you think, well, I need to dive in a little bit more, it used to be that CalPADS technical training was limited to 2 people per LEA. They've changed that. Now they've got a new training registration website, and they have basically webinars that have a much bigger capacity. So the link is included in this Flash 309 that's down at the bottom of the slide. But basically, allow as many people from your LEA as could fit, and there's no special account needed anymore. You don't have to be pre-approved. There's going to be improved scheduling, so it's all going to be in one place. And then if you're someone who just has a casual interest, I will say that the CSIS YouTube training channel has a lot of stuff that's really designed for like absolute newbies who are like, I don't know, I hear a lot about CalPADS, what can I learn? And they're like CalPADS basics and CalPADS data coordinator training. They'll give you just a brief overview. It'll definitely help you understand how CalPADS works and why it takes such a big role in accountability systems. We also have the regional meetings this year. These are not, I wouldn't say recommended for everybody, but they always include stuff that's relevant. We'll of course share it with you, whatever comes across, but just so you know and you have it, you might just put it, register and then get the materials and kind of skim through them, because things like that Hillary mentioned earlier, the elimination of the CalPADS course code for the college credit other, which is going to be parsed out over a year or so, but they may have information about what does this include? What does this not include? What kind of courses shouldn't go in there and what kind should? So there are registration links for these meetings. They're regional meetings, but they're, you can choose from any of the 4 sessions, whichever fits your schedule. And then finally, this is actually our colleagues at CSIS in lieu of the thing we did last year, which was statewide CalPADS, where we went, submission by submission and what the other people's role is. This year, they're doing a data governance series. It starts in October, and it's really designed for executive leadership, right? The people who really can prioritize. That could be assistant soups, chief technology officers, but they also want some of the CalPADS people there. But you may have a role in this if you're the LEA CalPADS administrator and you feel like, wow, we could really improve our processes. They're going to go through kind of the beginnings of a data governance process. And I will say that data governance goes well beyond student data. It can include HR data. It includes, financial data, anything that you're collecting. So this would be kind of an intro to how to build a data governance process for your LEA. So you need some big time decision makers there. I wouldn't say, I don't think in any of my roles I would have been have enough influence to make this stuff happen on my own. Even as the director of assessment, research, and evaluation, would have needed somebody to push it. But if you have somebody who's been talking about this in your LEA, consider getting them to go. We're hosting a watch party, so it's October 7th. It's going to be the Southern Region B meeting in San Diego, but we're going to host a watch party. So it'll be, we have a limited capacity in our room, but like 20 people or so, and I'll facilitate that. And then October 14th, if that date works better, there's in-person in Riverside. So the registration is there. And I'll get more details out about the October 7th version. And then finally, we have our own series. This is really for school level, but I know some people from district level came last year and shared the ideas with their site administrators. But this is the second year we're doing this with our 21 CSLA colleagues. It's a lot of fun. It's the series Navigating Data, Empowering Principals to Drive Equity, Engagement, and Academic Achievement in Schools. We kind of go soup to nuts, like here's your whole year, here's how you lay out your data for the year, here's how you build it into your site council, here's how you build it into all the decision making. So we're going to do it again, and the first meeting's in person in November, and then subsequently we go completely Zoom. And we had a great turnout last year and had a lot of fun doing it as well. And now to the assessment team.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see so many familiar faces, so many profile pictures and default boxes with the user's first initial in them as well. Big welcome to those joining us for the first time. If you're new to DAAN or new to assessment, we know how important it is to have colleagues in your corner who you can call and rely upon readily for our ideas and insight. We know how tough it is to get to know people by looking at their first initial in the box. So we encourage you to come off mute with us at the weekly Wednesdays at One Network, including tomorrow at 1, or take advantage of one of the upcoming in-person events. Even if you're located a bit far from Downey, it's worth the drive, including that new coordinator convening if you're new. So last week, LACOE hosted one of the in-person high school equivalency and proficiency summer convenings held across the state, August 12th through 22nd. Recording of the content was just posted. If you oversee GED or HiSET, I encourage you to make it to one of the in-person versions of the convenings, in addition to watching that recording. And that's the next time they have that roadshow. That roadshow's ended for the current session. The less scripted interpretive commentary and contextual insight is a bit more freely offered in person. You can find that all-important supplementary commentary and some recorded online resources in the CAASPP world. I liken it most to the Coordinator How-To Hub. If you haven't checked out those local vignettes on CAASPP and LPAC testing, you really should. One insight I like to highlight from the in-person session is that there is a need to seek waivers, fee waivers for qualifying students. The links on the slide take you to resources for being that advocate for impacted youth. If you are responsible for the assessment side of DAAN, you probably wouldn't be here if it were not for the California School Directory. That is, the superintendent or charter administrator named in this directory is the designator of those CAASPP and LPAC primary LEA coordinators. I want to point out 2 incidental changes in the directory that related to your work. On August 18th, CDE sent out an email to all CDS users listserv subscribers. Yes, get yourself on all the CDE listservs if you haven't already. A link is at the bottom of the slide. An email went out indicating that minor changes were going to be adding a new code for special educated and adult transition programs and removing the word non-sectarian or not promoting any specific religious affiliation from MPS, from out-of-state non-public public certified school. So if you're new to the district level, coming from a site, training and testing for MPS schools may be something new on your plate. I know finding LEAs and contacts, especially MPS schools, on that California School Directory, very important. So changes there. Speaking of new, the 7th and 14th of this month, CDE hosted the annual Assessment and Accountability Information Meeting, AAIM, where we got a chance to hear all about what's new and improved in the assessment systems this year. You might recognize this as slide 21 from Day 1 PowerPoint resource. CDE helpfully posts slides and has posted those slides and recordings in a resource guide for anyone who missed the show. We just wanted to reiterate a few key points briefly. Several changes are being made for the LPAC. Initial LPAC results used to be found within a dedicated initial LPAC reports tab, but in order to streamline the reports and simplify the system for coordinators, those are now moved to the general LEA reports or site reports tabs. The LPAC students meeting reclassification criteria 1 report is also new, and I'll address that on the next slide. That new LPAC students meeting reclassification criteria 1 reports now found under the LEA reports tab, and helpfully it's also placed in the site reports, meaning that it's available to users with a site coordinator role. It's a great go-to for delivery to your site and district EL coordinators, principals, others involved in reclassification as results roll in during and after the summative LPAC window to ensure that reclassification decisions can be made as early and easily as possible. Criterion 1, of course, refers to the first of 4 criteria for reclassification of English learner students as fluent English proficient. And you find that definition for those 4 criteria in the online LPAC information guide. Those statewide standardized ELP criterion inform those reclassification decisions. And that LPAC information guide is housed in the manuals library. And a great feature of the manuals library now is the manuals library homepage. There's a check mark you'll see indicating the manual has been updated for 25-26, so you know it's new. CD's Tracy Albee, who oversees LPAC, also indicated last week that end-of-year files will be or have been sent out this week to LEAs. And in this slide is a link to the master list for those end-of-year files for 24-25 summative LPAC and summative alternate LPAC results. That's the Los Angeles County list of students who are eligible per criterion 1. Students got a 4 on the summative LPAC or 3 on the summative alternate LPAC. So queuing those reclassification queries.
Continuing our journey for LPAC, it is initial LPAC season. So initial LPAC is triggered by that home language survey, and I'm sure most of you are already up to your eyeballs and working through this. However, special considerations need to be going a little bit deeper for our students who may need an alternative LPAC. There are some tools here that the state has provided to help with these decision making. There's the decision making tool as well as the CAASPP tool. These are really put together to help you with a team make the best decision for students. Let's go to the next slide. However, we've broken it down to a very simplified chart for you. It's important to note that you only have 30 calendar days, not school days, 30 calendar days to complete the initial LPAC assessment from the first day of attendance. So you need to have a signed and finalized IEP that states alternative assessment within that time period. Keep in mind, it must go to CalPADS, that's 24 to 48 hours, then to TOMS, that's 24 to 48 hours, then to the testing system, that's 24 to 48 hours. So you need to account for those 6 additional days prior to you being able to start the assessment. So if they have that signed, finalized IEP, yes, go ahead and give them that initial alternative LPAC. But if it is not signed, it needs to be given to them as the standard initial LPAC with universal tools and designated supports to really support that child on that classification. All right. There has been an initial LPAC refresh. I know one of the things that I always wanted to look for when I sat in on these meetings is what's new. So we've put these giant new blurbs to let you know what is new. The initial LPAC had a 30% refresh. That means if you've not reprinted the DFAs, the PFAs, the training binders, that is all new and needs to be redone. August 8th was the deadline for all LEA coordinators to complete the LEA certification in Moodle. So if that has not been done at your district, it is essential it is done, or some of you might have a sharing agreement. A test examiner. This question has come up quite a lot. Anyone who is giving the initial LPAC needs to complete the initial LPAC assessment training in Moodle. The question is, well, when's the deadline? The deadline is before they give the test. It is important that they have finished all of the training that they need before they give the test. Annual calibration is required. We have some links down there below for you to get easy access to that information. LPAC information guideline updates. Here's what's new. Some minor changes, the dates, of course. Estimated testing times have been updated. more information on the exclusion of TK, and additional information about census day data. There's also been a reorganization of the appendices. But the major updates that you're going to find is there's a new chapter called Accessibility Resources, and embedded within that is the Accessibility Matrix. There will be an update for that coming within the next few weeks, so keep an eye out for that. They have also moved some of the in-chapter menu topics, including domain exemptions, and there's a whole section on selective mutism, which is really important when you're giving the speaking section. There is a great video that was put together on the teacher hand scoring system, and it really breaks it down as to what's new. So there's a new filter and search, there's new visual cues for what's pending, there's rubrics, resources, and item details that are now in one window rather than multiple tabs that you have to click through in order to get to what you needed. The scoring changes are now saved automatically. That is a major win for all of us who sometimes forgot to hit save. And now you can submit scores directly from the scoring page. Now, if everything I just said does not make any sense to you, my suggestion is go watch this video, because he's going to give you this great list, and then he's going to show you exactly what these things mean and how they are enacted in the system. So if this is new to you, no problem, we got you covered. There's a link right there. The interim and formative assessments for ELA, there's been an update. We have 14 new ones. We have 2 new FIABs for each grade level, grades 3 through 8 and high school. There's a text analysis for literary and a text analysis for informational. So keep moving up on those FIAB options that we can have.
All right. There's also 8 FIABs, 8 additional FIABs for mathematics, and for a few reminders on the use of interim and formative assessments. Their use is for you. That means they're flexible and optional. You can provide access early in the school year via Tom's role assignments. Especially valuable is the interim assessment administrator only role, which gives access not only to those interims, but also access to students' full academic history of statewide summative and interim assessment through SIRS for teachers when they're rostered. You want to be reminded that high stakes decisions are prohibited for use with interim and formative assessments. And finally, you see that red padlock in the bottom right side of the slide. Interims are for use with students. Items are secure and meant for LEA staff and student use only. And there are resources out there that are for use with our most important partners, our parents, for example. And those don't require user accounts, don't require login, like released items and the practice and training tests. But those interim and formative assessments are secure. Back to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Stephen. So Tools for Teachers also experienced a bit of an update. So those of us who have been waiting for Tools for Teachers to get more LPAC resources, some of them are coming down the pike. We have 10 new resources that are really focused on professional development and how we can better support our English language learners. There will also be 9 new resources in the area of listening and reading. There's a lot of writing in there, so now we're going to be getting listening and reading, and that should be coming up real soon. Excellent. The 1% justification survey, everybody's favorite survey. We just wanted to give you a few reminders on that. You will only report students who are tested at your LEA. But if you serve students in another LEA, such as a non-public school, you do need to include these students in your LEA survey. There's a widget in Tom's now to help you complete this survey, and it will open at the end of September, probably right around when we have our next DAAN meeting. So don't worry, we'll have your back then too. But all LEAs must complete and submit this survey. If you want a little bit more information, we've dropped the Day 1 from Ames resource guide for you.
All right, the California Alternate Assessments for Science has some test administration changes. The required number of embedded performance tests were reduced from 4 to 3, and the number of questions for each of those performance tests has increased, so 15 instead of 10. Student responsiveness survey at the end of each embedded performance task was removed. The CAA for Science now has 2 forms. Form assignments will match that of the California alternate assessments for ELA and math, and you'll be either assigned Form 1 or Form 2 for all California alternate assessment subject areas for your LEA, or in very large LEAs for your school. As you may be familiar, the CAA for Science is the only one of the CAASPP assessments that is intended to be utilized during the whole year. All the other CAASPP testing windows are eligible to open only after completion of 66% of the instructional days. So CAA Science testing occurs between September 16th, that's right around the corner, and the end of the school district's 25-26 instructional calendar. So that's different. It will require some additional planning. So check out the CAA for Science Administration Planning Guides as a resource in supporting that work. Administration planning guides are made available in advance to give teachers and test examiners as much time as possible to plan how best to integrate each of these 3 embedded performance tests into that instructional calendar. And in support of this planning effort, I'd love to talk to you or your staff about the successes you've had and challenges you've faced in implementing this novel structure, this whole year structure. So please drop your email address in the chat if you are currently using a year-long administration of the CAA for Science, or even if you plan to in this next school year. So drop your email address in the chat if you're currently using that year-long administration. I'll let those roll in. Sarah?
Thank you. Those of you who dropped in chat, please be on the lookout because Stephen and I will be contacting you for more information. So if you were with us last year, we made a little bit of a joke about this, but now it is locked and loaded. Beginning this year, 25-26, there will be some achievement level descriptor changes. So level 4 will go from standard exceeded to standard advanced or advanced. Level 3 will now be proficient, 2 will be developing, and 1 will be minimal. Only the language and the levels will be changed. The scores and the cut points will remain the same, so these will be comparable year to year. So it's only the words that are flipping. Next slide. Now, how are we going to communicate this to all of our stakeholders, our teachers, our families, our school boards? This is how our state is going to be supporting this. The school student score data files will be updated. SIRS will be updated. The test results page will be updated. Student score reports will be updated. But most importantly, Starting Smarter will be updated to reflect this, and we'll have a full explanation of what these new titles mean. That will be very important with how we're communicating with our parents and families and other stakeholder partners. There's a really great video that was put together by Devin Triplett, and it goes over all of the things that are available to us in Starting Smarter. It shows what resources might be best supportive of our parents. It shows how they can access all the different languages, as well as how you as an LEA coordinator or administrator or even a TOSA might help support our families in understanding what these score reports mean and how they can support their students on their journey in education to really be a true partner on the team.
Just a note on the progress toward eligibility for the use of the California Spanish Assessment for the high school sealed by literacy. Those 24-25 CSA student score reports, the first set are usable for the seal, are tentatively planned to be released in December 2025, so usable for seal determinations for students who completed the exam as a sophomore or junior. Look out for updates on the optional CSA at upcoming State Board of Education meetings. Just briefly, the California Assessment Resource Matrix is updated yearly to adjust to the changing needs of students and test administrators in California. This year, several updates were made. We'll not go over them in detail. You might notice that our visual for the slide is in the weeds, but we want you to be aware that if you've seen the list in the past, it may have changed since you last worked with it. So as of 8/19/25, the expected fall post of the matrix update has not yet dropped. And I believe there was a expected date of October listed in the prior slide that I showed those expected dates and completed updates. However, one resource has an update and includes these updates, and that's the ISAP tool. So just pulling a few reminders and updates to the highlights. The ISAP tool, the individual student assessment accessibility profile, now explicitly includes one of those updates. For example, the non-embedded sensory items such as cue the air horn, fidgets, textured seat cushions or foot rockers as part of the available options. Not embedded accommodations must be listed, of course, in a student's IEP or Section 504 plan. And if you look at that ISAP tool, those sensory items are included in the accommodations list for students needing support for executive functioning, attention, cognition, control, and processing. As I mentioned, those updates to the accessibility resources are embedded into the ISAP tool, even if the matrix has not been, or the update to the manual has not been posted.
And if those last two slides hurt your brain, we want to invite you to Accessibility Supports for All. Stephen and I will be hosting in collaboration with our Universal Design for Learning, as well as our Special Education Department, a two-part series that will go over how we can better support our students throughout the year and not just putting these accessibility resources in come test time, but how they can be embedded throughout their educational journey. And we'll be talking about all of these new changes and digging more into the weeds rather than just throwing them all on one slide. So if that hurts your brain, come join us. The link to register is right there. Hit that next slide. In addition, Stephen and myself will be providing a variety of free professional developments for you. We have some guest stars who are coming to talk about AI supports for English language learners and how it can support their educational journey. We'll be doing Zero to Hero, talking about the writing extended response and how very small changes can really make a big impact. We'll then be diving deeper into Pin the Tail on the genre, talking more about writing. So we have I can't forget that we have CAST Academy, a very fan favorite. So we want to make sure that you have access to all of them. On our on our assessment catalog, you will find everything we are offering this year open and ready for registration, and we can't wait to see you there. And now back to Evan.
I'm so busy sending emails in the background and all these questions rolling in. So why don't we take just a 5-minute break, because we've been going for 90 minutes. And if you want to cut out, you feel free. But what we wanted to do in this next section is do a little dive. If you haven't figured out how to visualize your summative data, that you've got the preliminary data that you've gotten in SIRS or in TOMS, we're going to share 2 different approaches and the pros and cons of each. We're going to do a little live demo, and we have links. But let's come back. Let's give 5 minutes. We'll come back right at 10:30, and we'll dive into those. And if you don't want to stick around, we understand. We're recording this, so you can watch it later, and the resources are included on Canvas. So we'll see you in just a few minutes. So welcome back, and I think we're going to start with a little. So we've had this conversation quite a few times. People are like, well, I got my data. Now what do I do with it? And you realize pretty quickly, particularly if you're at a district level, like, what do I use to visualize my data, and how, there are limitations to both. So we thought we'd show you 2 different methodologies to look at it. And we are going to queue up this as a little bit of a homework assignment. And you may have EduClimber or some other tool where you've already loaded your data, and it's fantastic. We would love for you to share that at our upcoming meeting in September. We're going to give you a homework assignment when we roll out. But right now, Sarah, I think, or Stephen, which one of you is going to do a little SIRS demo for us?
Yeah, I think I'm starting with SIRS. So we'll explore how to access, interpret preliminary CAASPP results It's very important, of course, as you support data-informed decision-making at your school or your districts. And we understand that these are early results that are being used to provide insight in how our students are performing, where we may want to dig deeper. We'll walk through SIRS briefly, highlight some key reports, show how this data can support your goals, whether that's instructional planning, identifying student needs, or tracking progress towards your plan or your goals for LCAP. There also are some great resources that are in depth on the CAASPP-LPAC website that support this work. I'll show you where you might find those as well. So let's start with accessing those resources and recordings and SIRS, and the place we're going to do that is caaspp-lpac.org. So here we are.
While you're navigating there, let me just say one thing. We forgot to mention this up front. There was some early communication that went out from CDE that kind of confused things a little bit, because for a few years now they've been pretty clear. This is your data. You can share it locally. You can use it for decision-making purposes. But there was a communication that went out that did say it was something to the effect of the data not being appropriate for public release. However, we reached out to CDE. We got clarification, and they said the final results letter will indicate our current guidance, this is from CDE, that assessment results from SIRS and TOMS are not embargoed, and LEAs are encouraged to use the results for local planning, including public meetings with their local governing board. So that's their current stance. So you can share summative data results with your governing board for decision-making purposes prior to the public release on October 15th. Oh, sorry, Stephen.
No, you will be able to hit the data that is embargoed. By hit it, I mean you'll be able to cause yourself an error by trying to get embargoed data, and I'll show you that in a few seconds. There is embargoed data, but it's statewide data, so we'll look at that as well. Let's see what happened to my browser. Here's my browser. Okay, here I am. Just for your FYI, the training and communication tab, upcoming, all training recordings. This is where you're going to find resources, excellent resource here, accessing some of the assessment result in SIRS. And there's also a data-based one, a series. Check those out. Great resources for further study. We're going to go from caaspp-lpac.org into SIRS. I am going to go to the SIRS sandbox. That's been enhanced this past year with the LPAC and CAS initials, composite claims for smarter balanced summative assessments for Yale and math. I encourage you instead to go to here and follow along and log into your live portal. Once I get into the sandbox here, I'm going to simulate what you might probably have. That is the district admin role. That is going to be like an LEA coordinator role. Here I am inside, and you can land here on the dashboard, giving a bit of a high-level overview of what your options are here for selection. There's also user guide and interpretive guide, excellent resources for further study and information. But why don't we dive into one of these reports? And in that first one, we can show where it is that you're going to hit that limit to what you can pull. And it is right here. We're on a yearly report. I'm going to include this whole sample district, but if I check this, click this box that says state results, and I am here on my 2024-25 academic year, that's where you're going to find a embargo. Oops. You'll find that embargoed until the statewide results are released. I don't know if the SIRS sandbox is going to show it. It does. So this is not going to be what it looks like in SIRS itself. And what it'll look like in SIRS itself is an error. It'll say you can't bring up the statewide results for this current academic year. That's what's embargoed. You can't show other districts results when you get those in the preview. When you maybe are asked to show results compared to other local districts, that has to wait until the public results are released. And the statewide results, those are also not published until the full publish at the later in the year. I would say out towards October. So this state results is going to get you hitting up against that wall of what is usable. If you unclick that, you'll go back to getting your data. It just won't pull in the actual SIRS if you click that button until that release has been made. All right, so I'm going to say go through and choose one of these reports. I happen to like this longitudinal report. I'm going to look at ELA in this system, and I'm going to look at a series of grade levels. This is going to be longitudinal, so it's going to look at progress over time. That's why it requires multiple grade levels. And I'm going to look from a current frame of 24-25. We can scroll down and choose. I know when I present on particular topics, there's always the question of how are my different groups functioning. Here it uses that subgroups word instead of groups. But you may notice something about these groups here in SIRS, and you have here race, ethnicity, Hispanic, Latino, American Indian, Asian, the ones you might expect. You have English language acquisition status, those you might expect. Here RFEP, IFEP, EL, and EO. You also have a subset of ELAS, that primary language. So you could just look at students who have a primary language of Spanish, for example. And you've got this migrant status, yes or no. That's all you've got. What's missing? You might notice that special ed is missing, and you might notice that I believe free and reduced price lunch is missing. What would also be missing? Homeless foster youth. Each of those are limited in what you will be able to filter for in SIRS. So SIRS is not as comprehensive in terms of student groups as what Evan will be showing you in a few moments. There are limitations on what you can see. But one of the advantages of utilizing SIRS is it is the same system you're going to want your teachers to be using. It's the same system you're going to be wanting your sites to be using on a regular basis, because it will be that source of data on an individual student, data on a classroom, data on for a teacher who is bringing up reports on students to learn about their progress over time up into the point they've come into a classroom. And it's a great resource for printing out individual score reports, SSRs, student score reports, not the ones they receive in the parent portal, but slightly modified versions of those for an individual student that might be usable for a teacher to use in a parent conference, or might be usable in IEP, or might be usable in looking at students' performance over time. Also, all these things, anything that is a statewide test, a CAASPP or an LPAC or an interim assessment, automatically ends up in SIRS. It doesn't require the extra step of loading it into your data system, your local data system. That means potentially you have additional, more comprehensive resources for all those statewide tests, but just the statewide tests. You won't have anything from iReady, of course. You won't have anything from NWEA, just those statewide tests. Looking at that, you can pull reports, of course, and view those in multiple ways. at individual student levels. You can also link out to additional tools at the teacher level to instructional resources and related content and tools for teachers. So an excellent resource also at the individual student, individual item level for interim assessments. You can look at individual items and pull up an individual item that a student responding to that is getting that score. Is there anything in particular any of us would like to look at in particular, or should we move on to the next step in that, the SIRS benefits and limitations? Sarah, you want to talk about that?
Sure. I wanted to give anyone a minute to raise any issues, concerns, questions, breakouts. Okay.
I know we sped through that just incredibly quickly. Each of those resources in CAASPP, those multi-part videos and webinars are you can get your 12 hours of SIRS study in there.
Daniel has a question. I think we have another question in the chat.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my question is, what's the minimum requirement for a classroom teacher to have access to SIRS? So, like, do we have to add them to TOMS as a test examiner? How do we do that?
Yeah, if you the best role I think for a teacher is a interim at the beginning of the year, unless they're going to be administering the CAA for science, is going to be the interim assessments only user role. And the reason is you will have access to administer the interims. You'll have access to the interim item bank. You'll have access to tools for teachers. Of course, any role will have that access. And also, if the teacher has been rostered, that means their class role has been added into SIRS. That rostered teacher will have access to their students and their students' past history of testing in statewide summative and interim assessments.
So if you're a classroom teacher, say in kinder, first, second, there's no reason for them to use SIRS, right? Because they don't have any state data, correct?
LPAC.
Oh, LPAC. So we should add them too, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And interims can be used by kinder, first, second. So
okay. So
great resource.
Begin the year interim assessment role is the way to start off the year. Okay, thank you.
And then, of course, you're going to have to manage that. You'll have to transition to, if your teachers are testing, you're going to have to transition during the testing season.
Thank you.
All right. So some of the benefits are you can see those interim assessment data points that Stephen was pointing out. You can also see item level data. Our teachers really leverage this a lot in my old district, and that they would give an interim and then identify the few questions that kids had problems with. Then they would analyze it. Is it a problem because there was tricky language, or is it a tricky concept? And then they would really work with that with the students, not particularly that question, but finding ways that that question showed up throughout their curriculum to make sure they were giving students multiple opportunities with it. It also includes instructional resources. There's a little blue button when you do interims on the side that will take you straight to lesson plans. There's the key distractor analysis. I love it. Why did they click C and not A when A was the correct answer? You can kind of look through that. There's also the writing trait scores. You can see how they did by genre. But there are some limitations, as Gabriella has already pointed out in the chat. If you wouldn't mind hitting that next slide for me. It does not include initial LPAC data as of this moment. There's also, you're unable to create a summative view for your whole district. It's broken down by grade level. So unfortunately, that's not something it's able to give you. It also doesn't do composite claims. It does domain claims. Wait, did I flip that?
Doesn't do domain claims. It does
composite claims. Thank you. Sorry, flip that. It's also, as Daniel pointed out, it's role-based. It must be assigned in TOMS. They do not automatically have access to it. And there's no item level data for summative because summative is adaptive. All right. And I think we hand it off to Evan and Hillary.
Thank you. So as an alternative, we wanted to pitch, we're making a pitch, right? So our colleagues up at the Sacramento County Office of Education a couple of years ago created this tool, and they've continued to refine it. And it's basically an Excel spreadsheet that has macros in it, and you can take your TOMS summary student score file and drop it in there for CAASPP. They actually have one for CAASPP and one for LPAC. We're only going to focus on the CAASPP now. And by the way, these are linked on Canvas, so you can download them from Canvas. And you'll basically, it gives you all the instructions, what you're going to do, but you're going to take that TOMS file, follow the instructions, you're going to drop it in within the workbook. They include an interpretive guide, so what each of the pieces means, so it's pretty expansive. One thing I really like about this, and I'll go get into the data in a minute, but it actually includes how to copy charts. So if you're like being asked, can you put together a presentation for the board? You can take the charts directly from here. It'll give you charts that then can be copied and reused and actually remodify. The format can be changed. It tells you how to do that. Here's the actual score data. This is all dummy data, so no PII is being revealed, but I do love pi. And then you get these amazing two different views, right? So you get both the kind of the smarter balance traditional meet and exceed standards, and then you get the dashboard, an estimate of the distance from standard. And I'm going to really focus on this for a minute. So we'll talk about one of the disadvantages. This does use some newer level Excel wizardry. So if you have like a 2013 version of Excel, it's not going to work. You either need to have Office 365 or a fairly current version of Excel. I'm not exactly sure which for the Mac. I'm on a Mac, and I think I've got Office 365. So that's why it's showing. But what you could see that is within, these are called slicers over here. You have all these different ways to slice up your data. And you can see because the TOMS data file does include an SED flag, it includes a homeless flag. So in this case, there was no data in there for homeless or foster, but all these means by which you can filter, right? And the one that came up recently is it doesn't trigger on the field for just IDEA flag, yes, no. It actually triggers on the primary disability type, which seems like limiting. Well, gee, what am I going to do? But you can actually use this little button, which is the multi-select, because right now it's showing all students, and I can go in and I can eliminate one view. Of course, now it's going to be really slow for me, and I can filter down and see only, this will give me a summation of all my students with disabilities, even though it's primary disability type, and I'm not sure why it's not playing nice right now. But yeah, it's freezing up. So it eats up a lot of space, this file does, and that's one of the downsides that we didn't mention. So you do get this nice summative. It gives you everything in your LEA. There we go. And so now it's going to behave. So if I wanted to toggle, like I said, I'm going to deselect one. Well, you can see my total number of students, 189, if I can get it to function. Anyway, the other aspect of this that I think is really cool, if I can get it to properly function, is in the pivot tables area. And this is kind of one of the little nuances of this. It's not going to behave now. But within the pivot tables, you can actually select a certain area and get a specific student list. So you can drill down. If I wanted to get into so let's say I wanted to drill into a composite claim here. I'm like, oh, we want to do some specialized supports for our students who are in the composite claim at the lower levels. I can actually double click, and it generates a list of the students who met that criteria. So this was students who in math composite claim were a level 2, and it gives me all the lists. So you could use this to do some of that drilling down that is a lot more readily available in SIRS. You can do that here as well. It also, like I said, will give you the dashboard. We'll talk about it in just a second, some of the limitations of this, but it's pretty cool. And I don't know that we've ever plugged it enough. We can help support you to a certain extent, right? We don't want you sending your personally identifiable student information by email to us. But if you're having trouble, we can walk you through it on Zoom and make sure, things are working, or even check your version. And it's really handy. I know one of our districts just recently used it and said, this is so great. This actually answered all my questions. I can present to my board. So I'm gonna
A
stop.
little reminder there, Evan, for a few people that are asking, the link to this is in our agenda, and I'm sure Karina, who has been dropping a link to our resources, she will go ahead and redrop that again in there for everyone. So
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it is. It's under, if it's not linked on the page, I think it's linked both in the agenda and it's in the modules portion. It's at the bottom of the module for this slide. So yeah, check the agenda instead. And thank you, Karina. Stephen, you want to take it back over and we'll just go through the pros and cons of this version?
Absolutely. All right, here's the slide.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen. So, comparison, they're both excellent tools for this early preliminary sharing of data. What I like about the SCOE tool, it does give you that clear LEA level summary that's not disaggregated by grade levels, which is kind of a little frustrating. It gives you that additional student group visibility into students with disabilities, your socioeconomically disadvantaged students, and those kind of governed. Those two things are governed by FERPA and by actually USDA rules. That's why they aren't shared, because they have more access, or people would have more access in SERS. That's why they don't appear in SERS. But you have to be also very use that as a consideration when you're using this tool, that you want to make sure you don't inadvertently reveal that because you have access to TOMS. I think Sarah said earlier, if you have to sign in, just consider it private data. The ability to copy those graphs is excellent. And then that dashboard estimate for the distance from standard, that's pretty unique, right? You don't get that everywhere. Limitations, it does require that newer version of Excel. The disaggregation by school, for some reason, there are multiple fields in which school is triggered. And in some cases, particularly at the county office, we see students who actually tested with us. We didn't mention, you have two options to download the data file. One is by tested, and then by enrolled. You want to choose by tested. These will be the kids who are with you and tested with you. For some reason, however, it'll periodically pick up a kid's, and I don't know why, it's just the field they chose to key off of. It'll pick up a student who's at a different school, was maybe at a different school at the end of the year when they pulled the data, but tested with you and will be assigned to you. But you'll see it in the slicer for the schools. You'll go, that's not our school. So you can either go back in and scrub that data or put in the right school where you knew they were. That's what we've recommended in the past. Finally, that distance from standard is an estimate. It doesn't take into account any of the business rules. It doesn't include your California alternate assessments, and it doesn't include any lowest obtainable scale scores. So if you didn't meet participation rate, it's not assigning losses. And it also, there may be kids who are transferred out who, fell outside the grace period or whatever, that wouldn't actually be yours. They didn't complete with you. So those are all factors that aren't, but it gives you at least a kind of a preliminary insights. That's kind of cool. I think moving on, we have just a couple wrapping up questions.
Before we end here, I think it's your turn now. We were kind of interested, now that we showed you a few different ways that you can download data and look at data. We are interested in how you use this data. So we have some questions up here. What do you use to share data? How are you sharing this data? And who are you sharing it with? And at this point, please feel free you can drop in the chat, but we'd love it if you kind of come off mic maybe and speak to us a little bit in the broader group about how you're sharing it and how you use it.
I can share for our district.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you. I use a combination from SERS, but we also use Illuminate. So, and my admin have found that to be really, they really like the representation of the data on there, and how I can disaggregate and compare years. So we've been looking at just to monitor some of our student groups, to monitor our cohorts, and see how we are progressing. I'm really excited about this tool that you just shared, though, because I feel like that's going to definitely bring some more. But I think the biggest thing that I've shifted in my new role here is just sharing that cohort data, because a lot of what we had was just non-cohort, comparing third to third year after year. So that's how the primary way we've been using it is to look at cohorts and really dive deeper into that.
Thank you, Stephanie. Seeing a couple additional options, a couple of other Illuminate users. There's a dashboard. Parsec being used.
We got created a dashboard.
Oh yeah, they're using Looker Studio. Sarah, that was your go-to, right? Okay.
That was definitely my go-to, built by Chris Miller over at Da Vinci School. Shout out to them. They have a really great foundation for that.
Yeah, and all of this is an effort to share in advance, right? You'll eventually get the full data file, you'll get the public release, but what we would like to foster is a sharing internally. And maybe to that end, since we're almost out of time, we've maybe move a slide forward here. We wanted to plug, oh yes, by the way, we mentioned this earlier, but the link to the science points converter is also in Canvas. So if you want to see what your science point, it'll take the same file and it'll convert that Tom's student score data file also to give you your science points, which will be pretty handy. But one more slide, there we go. One more beyond that. Our next meeting is September 30th. We just wanted to give you some homework for then. So if you go to the next slide, please, Stephen. So throughout the year, but especially it's like starting next meeting, if you come in person, we want to like leverage this, particularly because we'll be meeting just before the release of the private preview and then subsequently the public release of the data. So we'd like to know what your best practices for sharing are, right? So there are a lot of factors to consider, like, how do you write a press release? How do you communicate with your board? What kind of data do you include? How do you manage expectations? Something I mentioned earlier, like what do you do if your data is not what you had hoped, right? If it's maybe certain student groups are not performing as well as other student groups and gaps are emerging. Building understanding around how things might change between your preliminary data and then that public release of the data, what you may see differently, and also the distance from standard, obviously, on the dashboard. The limitations of your student groups, what you can see, what you may not see. You may even have some students who get transferred out when the dashboard comes around because of their district of special ed accountability. And then finally, when the data release comes out, who and what you want to share, what's best practices. So we wanted to lay this foundation. Here's our ask of you who may join us in person, besides the opportunity network. Come back with what your plan to communicate is. If you have like a traditional, this is a Friday letter we send out, or here's what we've sent out in the past, and here's what we focus on. Bring that, right? We'd like to share that with the folks who are in the room. How you're preparing your site and district admins, because there's a lot of people, brand new principal. Now you've got to bring everybody up to speed. What are your best practices for building that data literacy around CAASPP particularly? And what do you feel has been your best practice to utilize preliminary data? I think Sarah, seeing her before she was a LACOE person, she was great at sharing, here's my Looker Studio view. And you're like, wow, people are doing some awesome stuff, right? This is before we had the SCOE tool, I think. And so I bet there's some other people like that we hope can share, how they do it and just kind of inspire others to try their own thing. Any other thoughts from the team?
None currently.
All right, guess not. Yeah, Margarita noting that she likes the tool, but sharing with schools in July, so it's always a little late for us to use. Yeah, we try to get we'll try to plug it, even if we don't have it yet, as soon as we can, like at the final meeting of DAAN, so it's going to be out there. They've been updating the SCOE tool for a few years now, so you can expect it'll be updated, and we'll try to remember this year to plug it in advance so you can leverage that if you don't have any other source for visualizing. And with that, it's 11 o'clock. like always, we always manage to land right at the end. So here's all our contact information. We didn't mention it earlier. All those other things we do outside of our DAAN, please email us. You know, we also have, usually we have a booking tool on our email addresses, and let us know, hey, I really like to hear more about how you facilitate, you know, the use of data for improved systems, right? So let us know. We're always available to hop on Zoom with you. And we will see you again. If you're new coordinator or feel like you're new, we'll get you the September 15th new coordinator, CAASPP and LPAC new coordinator training information out. We're going through the coordinator file right now and identify those folks that we think are new, and we'll make sure you get the link to register for that if you can come in person. And then we'll see you on September 30th.